It is late February in Minnesota, and there is almost no snow on the ground. This is supposed to be the frozen heart of winter, but the winter of 2023 to 2024 simply never arrived. We are walking into Ritter Farm Park, 340 acres of old farmland on a lake south of the Twin Cities. 50 years ago, this was a working dairy farm, with cows in the barn and chickens in the yard. Today, it is Lakeville's largest park, and it is quietly one of the best places to read the whole story of this corner of Minnesota. So lace up and walk it with me. Ritter Farm Park sits on the west shore of Lake Marion in Lakeville, Minnesota, about 25 miles south of Minneapolis. Lakeville is the largest city in Dakota County and the 9th most populous city in the whole state. The park covers an estimated 340 acres of rolling former farmland, which makes it the biggest park in the Lakeville system. Inside its boundaries are more than 8.5 miles of trails, winding over low ridges, into shallow ravines, and down to the lakeshore. The main loop we are following runs about 3 miles, with close to 300 feet of gentle climbing along the way. The first thing you notice here is that the land refuses to lie flat. The trail rolls constantly, up over a low ridge, down through a swale and back up again. Bare oaks stand on the high ground, and the grass between them is the color of toast in this snowless February. Every one of these rises and hollows was left behind by glacial ice, and we will come back to that story shortly. For now, the trail bends onward, and the trees begin to open toward the water. For most of the last century, the land under our feet answered to one family. This was the Ritter Farm, a working dairy operation with milk cows, chickens, pigs, and fields of crops. The Ritters worked this ground through the seasons, milking in the dark of winter mornings and putting up hay in the summer heat. Their farmstead stood among these same oaks, above the same lake. It was ordinary Minnesota farm life, and that is exactly why it matters, because almost none of these old lakeshore farms survived intact. Walk slowly and the farm starts to show itself. These wide grassy openings in the woods are old pasture and cropland, still holding their shape half a century after the last harvest. Some of the trees stand in suspiciously straight lines, the ghosts of fence rows and field edges. A farm does not vanish when the animals leave. It fades slowly, over decades, and a walker in late winter, with no leaves to hide the bones of the land, gets the clearest view of all. Picture this hillside 100 years ago. A dairy herd must be milked twice every day, in June heat and in January cold, so the family's whole year turned on the rhythm of the barn. Chickens and pigs filled out the yard, and the crop fields fed the animals through the long winters. The eastern half of Lakeville Township was rich, open farm country, shipping its bounty through Farmington toward Hastings and St. Paul. The Ritters were one thread in that much larger fabric of southern Minnesota farming. Today, those barn chores are gone, and the farm belongs to everyone. Locals call Ritter Farm Park the crown jewel of the Lakeville park system, and it is easy to see why. Its 8.6 miles of trails welcome hikers, trail runners and birders, and riders on horseback in the warm months. In a normal winter, 5.7 of those miles are groomed for cross-country skiing. There is even a 5-acre off-leash area where the dogs of Lakeville get their own piece of the old farm. The turning point came in 1972. That year, the city of Lakeville began buying the 340-acre farm from the Ritter family, piecing together the money from state grants, federal grants, and a referendum passed by its own citizens. Think about the timing. Lakeville had only merged its village and township the year before, and suburban growth was beginning to roll south. The city chose to secure its biggest lakeshore property as parkland before anyone else could bid on it. And that single decision shaped everything we are walking through today. The purchase agreement had a remarkably humane clause. The Ritter family was allowed to keep living on their old farm even after the sale, and family members stayed on the property for years, with the last of them passing away in 1989. In their place, the farm slowly became a classroom. The city established the Ed Mako Environmental Learning Center here, a nature center that now hosts school groups, family programs, bird banding demonstrations, and an archery range. Children come to the old dairy farm to learn how prairies grow and how chickadees survive a Minnesota winter. It is hard to imagine a better afterlife for a farm. From the high ground, the trail drops toward the water through a stand of oaks. In summer, these woods ring with birdsong, and even now chickadees and nuthatches work the bare branches. The light this afternoon is low and golden, the particular light of a February that thinks it is April. Somewhere ahead, through the gray trunks, the lake is waiting. It has been waiting a very long time. Lake Marion is a gift of the Ice Age. Around 12,000 years ago, the last great ice sheet was melting back across Minnesota, and it did not leave quietly. Enormous blocks of stranded ice lay buried in the rubble the glacier left behind. When those buried blocks finally melted, the ground above them collapsed into deep hollows, which filled with water and became the kettle lakes that freckle this part of the state. The rolling ridges and ravines of Ritter Farm Park are heaps of that same glacial debris. Every dip in this trail is a footprint of the ice. And there it is, spread out below the trail, Lake Marion. In an ordinary late February, this would be a white plain dotted with the shelters of ice anglers. This year, the record warmth has made the ice thin and treacherous, and the lake lies quiet. Bare shoreline oaks frame the view where summer leaves would hide it. That is one of the honest compensations of a lost winter, the whole shape of the lake, visible from a hiking trail. The lake below us spreads across about 530 acres, with roughly 10 miles of shoreline folded into bays and points. It is divided into three main basins, an East Bay, a Middle Bay, and a West Bay, and it reaches a maximum depth of about 21 feet. Ritter Farm Park holds down the quiet western shore, while neighborhoods and older lake lots line much of the rest. The interstate runs just beyond the far shore, which makes this side feel even more removed. From above, the lake looks like a puzzle piece dropped between the freeway and the farms. The trail runs close to the shore here, over ground the Ritter cattle once knew. The small waves make almost no sound, just a faint conversational lapping at the frozen mud. Out on the open water, a few ducks drift where by rights there should be ice thick enough to walk on. It is strange whether to hike through, but it makes for easy, peaceful walking. We follow the shoreline with the low sun on the water. Beneath that surface, Lake Marion carries a genuinely good fishery. State surveys find northern pike here in above-average numbers, alongside a healthy population of largemouth bass. Bluegills are abundant, crappies are common, and there are walleyes too, fewer in number but running larger than average. A public boat launch keeps the lake busy with anglers from spring through fall, and in a normal year, ice fishing carries that season right through winter. The old farm on the shore has become one of the best seats in the house. Climbing away from the water, the trail crosses another grassy shoulder of the old farm. It is worth pausing here, because everything we can see has changed names again and again in 2 centuries. The lake down there began on the maps as Prairie Lake. The township around it began as survey lines on a government plat. To understand how it all became Lakeville, we need to meet a lumber baron with a wagon line and an eye for real estate. In 1854, a St. Paul lumberman named J.J. Brackett staked the first claim here, and the next year he platted a village between the lake and the Dodd Road. He named the town site Lakeville for the beautiful sheet of water he called Prairie Lake. Brackett was a land speculator who ran a wagon stage line between St. Paul and Faribault, and his new village made a convenient stop on the route. His employee Griffin Phelps followed close behind and became the first postmaster. By 1858, the little village boasted 2 hotels, a blacksmith shop, a carpenter shop, a gun shop, a shoemaker, and a saloon. The road that made Brackett's village possible was itself brand new. In 1854, Captain William Dodd cut a rough wagon road north from St. Peter, passing right through what would become Lakeville, and it grew into the township's main north to south artery. The route crossed rolling country that had long been part of the homeland of the Dakota people, whose name Dakota County still carries. Settlers, stages, and farm wagons followed Dodd's track by the hundreds. Pieces of the old alignment survive today as Dodd Boulevard, still threading through the middle of the modern city. On April 6, 1858, just weeks before Minnesota became a state, Dakota County Commissioners created Lakeville Township, one of the county's original townships. 2 years later, the township counted 598 people. During the Civil War, 51 Lakeville men answered the call to serve. Walking these quiet hills, it is worth remembering how small and fragile these frontier communities really were. A bad harvest or a missed railroad, and a town could simply evaporate. Lakeville very nearly did. In 1869, the Hastings and Dakota Railroad laid rails across the township, and the line did not come to Brackett's Village. Attempts to buy depot land in Lakeville Village failed, so the railroad chose a spot half a mile east and called it Fairfield. Businesses wanted rail access, so one by one they picked up and moved to Fairfield, and the original Lakeville declined. In 1878, Fairfield incorporated as a village, and when the bill passed the state, the name was changed back to Lakeville. The town had died and been reborn half a mile from where it started, and most people driving through today have no idea. By 1900, the combined township and village population still numbered barely 1,000 people. The eastern half of the township was rich, open farm country. The western half, where we are walking, was a softer landscape of trees, lakes, and rolling hills, and it began attracting summer cottages and visiting fishermen. City people discovered that Prairie Lake was a lovely place to spend July. That quiet discovery set the stage for the strangest chapter in Lakeville's history, and it involves an amusement park and the fastest horse on earth. In 1910, an amusement park called Antlers Park opened on the shores of this lake. Thousands of visitors arrived on shiny gas-electric rail cars, stepping out onto a lakeshore of picnic pavilions, dining halls, and a bathing beach. The enterprise was the creation of Colonel Marion Savage, together with partners William Mason and George O'Rourke. For a few glittering seasons, this quiet farming lake became one of the most fashionable day trips in the Twin Cities. And the man behind it all owed his fame and much of his fortune to a single brown horse. That horse was Dan Patch, the most famous harness racer in American history. Marion Savage, a Minneapolis feed merchant, bought him in 1902, and the pacer became a national celebrity whose name was used to sell an astonishing range of merchandise. On September 8, 1906, before a crowd of more than 90,000 people at the Minnesota State Fair, Dan Patch paced a mile in 1 minute and 55 seconds, a time that stood as legend for decades. Savage stamped the horse's name on his farms, his products, and his railroad, and he left his own name here. Prairie Lake became Lake Marion, renamed in honor of Colonel Marion Savage himself. Try to hold that picture as you walk this shoreline. Bathing crowds along the beach, band music drifting from the pavilions, thousands of day trippers in their Sunday best across the water. All of it just across the lake from the Ritter family's dairy barn, where the cows still needed milking twice a day no matter what the excursion crowds were doing. Two completely different Minnesotas shared this one small lake. Only one of them lasted. The railroad that fed Antlers Park was known to everyone as the Dan Patch Line. Its self-propelled gas-electric cars ran from Minneapolis down to Northfield, making 10 stops in Dakota County, an early experiment in what we would now call commuter rail. Then, in July of 1916, the story collapsed with brutal speed. Dan Patch died on July 11th, and Marion Savage, already in the hospital, died almost immediately afterward. The glamour years of Antlers Park proved short-lived, and the resort gradually faded into today's quiet picnic grounds and city beach. The lake kept the name Marion, a memorial hiding in plain sight. For the next half-century, Lakeville went back to being farm country, drifting from under 1,200 people in 1900 to fewer than 2,000 by 1950. Then the freeway era arrived and everything accelerated. The village and the township merged in 1971. Lakeville officially became a city at the start of 1974, and the farm fields began turning into neighborhoods. Today, nearly 70,000 people live here, in the 9th largest city in Minnesota. Seen against that curve, the decision to buy the Ritter Farm in 1972 looks less like a purchase and more like a rescue. Growth is not an abstraction when you stand here. Beyond the park boundary, rooftops now run for miles, and the freeway hums somewhere past the far shore. Yet inside these 340 acres, the loudest thing this afternoon is a woodpecker working a dead oak. That contrast is the whole argument for parks like this one. The land does not need to be spectacular to be worth saving. It needs to be here. The high ground of Ritter Farm Park carries a native plant community mapped as pin oak and bur oak woodland. This is the borderland vegetation of southern Minnesota, the shifting frontier where western prairie met eastern forest. Bur oaks are the great survivors of that frontier, wrapped in corky, fire-resistant bark thick enough to shrug off a passing grass fire. For thousands of years, regular fires kept this country open and park-like, with scattered giant oaks standing over a sea of grass. It is one of the most beautiful landscapes North America ever produced, and today one of the rarest. Some of the oaks beside this trail are old enough to remember the farm, and the biggest may be older than the town itself. Notice how the largest ones spread their branches wide and low, the posture of a tree that grew up in open ground with no neighbors crowding it. That wide-crowned shape is the signature of Savanna, preserved in living wood. The Ritter cattle grazing beneath them accidentally imitated the old fires, keeping the brush down and the ground open. Farm and Savanna, it turns out, were never complete strangers. Today, the city is deliberately turning parts of the old farm back toward its deepest past. Ongoing prairie restoration work began at Ritter Farm Park in 2021, returning native grasses and wildflowers to the old fields. Restoration here means sowing native seed, cutting invasive brush, and reintroducing the ancient tool this land evolved with carefully managed fire. Prairie openings already thread through the park, and each season of work knits them closer to the oak woodland around them. It took 1 century to turn Savanna into farmland, and it will take patient decades to coax it back. And that brings us back to this strange, brown February. The winter of 2023 to 2024 was Minnesota's warmest ever recorded, beating the old record by nearly 3 degrees. December ran about 5 degrees warmer than any December before it, and the Twin Cities logged 18 winter days that reached 50 degrees, with one February afternoon hitting 65. The ski trails here waited for snow that barely came, like ice formed late and thin, and hikers walked bare ground in a month that normally buries it. A warming climate does not always announce itself with catastrophe. Sometimes it simply steals a season. The light is fading over Lake Marion, and our loop is closing where it began, near the edge of the old Ritter farmstead. 340 acres, one farm family, a lost amusement park, the fastest horse of its age, and a winter that never came. Every trail is a story if you walk it slowly enough. If this one moved you, come walk it yourself some February in snow or not. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.